Well, good morning, everyone. I'm excited to have a great group of folks with us this morning for our Hard Money Monday podcast. I'm Brian Athey. I'm hosting the podcast. I'm the president of Congressional Capital, which is a Washington, D.C. based real estate hard money lending company, which is how I had the occasion to meet each of my guests today. Jessica, if you want to just start and we'll kind of go around the Zoom room and introduce ourselves, talk about your background and kind of how you got into real estate, that'd be really great.
Sure. My name is Jessica Bachay. I run Luna Development. It's a real estate development company based in Washington, D.C., obviously, with my husband, Hyder Hamas, but I run kind of our day-to-day operations. How we got into it, it's very personal, really.
Good. Personal's good.
Yeah, it's all about kind of how we bought our first home. We were living in a basement apartment, kind of analyzing the financials on how much we paid our landlord, and really were astounded by that amount and decided, the next property that we're going to buy together, well, the first property we were going to buy together as a couple, we wanted to have a basement apartment that we could rent and earn some income on. So we ended up buying a home, and it was not, it didn't have the requirements to be a separate unit. So we ended up finding a contractor and converting it into a duplex. And we met some amazing contractors through that process. We learned so much. And once we were done with that, well, we still live in the house and rent out that basement. Our contractor was like, so what's next? So we kind of developed that relationship and started acquiring homes and working with him to do full renovations on them.
So you had the rare good contractor experience. That's great. I'm
Yeah.
happy for it. You know what's really interesting is that I've had many people who have become borrowers of our company who started that way, who really just
Yeah.
started with renovating a basement, renting it, and then being like, wow, okay. I've gotten the gift of people say passive income. There's no such thing. I've gotten the gift of almost passive income, and now I'm going to go out and try to do it, on my own. So that's good. So when
Yeah,
did you?
I
Yeah.
would say we interviewed probably 10 people before we found
Oh,
found
good.
the contractor that we ended up using. So
And what was the reason you hired that contractor, if you can remember?
honestly, we trusted him and believed him, and he had some good references, but he was also kind of someone that we could just trust.
Yeah. No, well, that's everything. I mean, trust is everything. And, it's funny because you read all these books about business and everybody has an opinion on how you should do it, but your gut tells you often is your guide. I mean, even as a lender, I've funded, I don't know, over 500 hard money loans, and my gut usually is right, thankfully. But when my gut makes me a little uneasy and I plow through and do it anyways, the results usually aren't very good. So instincts matter. Nikisha, how about you? If you could introduce yourself and tell us about your background and how you got into development, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nikisha Carpenter. I've been in DC for about 22 years, originally from Detroit. Have a bachelor's in construction, so that's kind of my gateway to development. Went to Bradley University in Peoria. I ended up in DC through an internship when I was in college. So my first job out of college was a Ritz-Carlton condominium. So that was kind of my intro to seeing the condo life, development life in DC.
Was
Um,
that was the one on 23rd or over?
uh, 22nd and M Street.
Yeah,
Yep.
22nd M. Oh, cool.
Yep. And then I worked for various general contractors in DC, some construction management firms, and I was doing basically managing construction for developers in DC, single families, small condominiums. And one of the developers I was doing a project for had a project that he wholesaled to me. He basically didn't have the funds to, and a friend of mine, we went in and purchased it, and I managed the construction. And I still own that property today, actually. It's really kind of like my financial backbone. When things get tough, I think about this project and I'm like, I've got so much equity over there. You're okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's just nice. And so I just kind of from there, just bought single family homes. I have owned property in DC and in Detroit. The first home I actually bought ever was my grandmother's house in Detroit. And it's been a ride for sure.
So what do
I
you do?
enjoy it.
Do you own any other ones other than your grandmother's home in Detroit?
I do. I own 4 other properties in Detroit.
How have those done during the pandemic?
They've been great. I think I've just lucked out, really, just been truly blessed through the pandemic. My tenants in DC, my tenants in Detroit, everyone's been able to pay. And even renting to folks that wouldn't even qualify, credit wise, right? They just did everything, Ubering, driving for Uber, doing what they needed to do to pay rent because they know that I, really helped them out in getting them a place.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's great. So right now, would you say that your focal point is the construction process? I mean, you obviously have a background in construction. Is that what you like to do and what you really spend your time on day to day?
It is. I think I like seeing things go from nothing where you got to, take 3 dumpsters full to get, empty it out to, to making this beautiful, modern top of the line place. So absolutely.
Yeah,
But construction piece.
I still get excited when our development projects get in drywall. Like I just think once you get there, it feels real. It feels like
Mhm.
everything's coming together, and it's an exciting process. Well, thank you. You also played college basketball, right?
I did.
That's yeah, it's good. So they're Division One.
Yeah, Bradley's is D1, Missouri Valley Conference.
We have 2 Division 1 athletes. I played college golf at a Division 1 school, so
Okay.
that's unique, right? So Julie, I actually wasn't very good, but I did play. But Julie, so why don't you tell us about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Julie Fletcher, and I'm part of JL Property Ventures. I have a business partner, Linda McElligott. Got involved in this about 5, almost 6 years ago now. Our first project, I'll just say, was a small renovation, and it took about 4 months, and it gave me such a feeling of accomplishment, and it was fast and furious. Building a team, that's something I love doing. I've done that all my career, building teams, whether it be in the political world where I first got started, in government, or in Florida, the Department of Commerce. I worked with lots of developers and putting together teams that were solving problems there, and attracting businesses and all that. And I worked for Nortel for a long time, running their community relations around the world. I mean, everything has been about building these things at somewhat of a more macro level. And I really enjoyed being more on the local level because I really felt like the networking and the raising the money, it's just the real connection with people is what I really loved about it. So something had happened in our family where I needed to take a break for a little while. I had my own business at the time doing consulting work, and then when I got right back into it, I had to. I really thought, we, like Nikisha, we had renovated our own personal homes, and like Jessica was talking about, and that experience was always really good. And then combining that with that, just wanting to get out there and really see what I could do, and really run the company myself. And that's really what I needed to do. Something had happened in our family and I just needed to control of everything. I couldn't work for somebody else at that point. I needed to do it. And so I took that leap and got into this. And I'm so happy because all those skills from all those other things that I've done, you really come together. And there's nothing like when you've really, all the problems that you might have in the development process, when you see those owners go in and they love it and this is their home, that's a really nice feeling.
Yeah, that's an incredible feeling, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're doing some affordable housing on the rental side on my development side, and one of the folks who works for me told me about a story of a woman who's using a voucher and she and her 6-year-old moved into one of our apartments, and she was crying when she was there because she couldn't believe that she was A, living in finally in a safe place for her child, and B, such a beautiful place. And
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of when it all comes together, right? When hopefully the economics work, and you're helping change people's lives,
Mhm.
which is really good fun. But well, thank you all for the introductions. It's my pleasure to have you here. The reason I wanted to do this today really was it occurred to me, or it has occurred to me over the years of doing hard money for 11 years in the city, that there really just aren't as many women-run development companies, at least that I come across, as there are men-run companies. And I wanted to try to understand why. So I thought about my network, and I thought I'd reach out to each of you and kind of get your opinion, and sort of see what you think about the landscape in Washington. I mean, that's really what I can speak to. I did look at some statistics online, which can often be misleading, but 63% of those who state that they're in the real estate development field are men. And so clearly there is a majority, in that vein. And if you take that a step further, I do wonder what percentage who actually run the companies are men, because it seems to be higher than that to me. What is your all's observation? Anyone can jump in of that fact and why. I mean, what do you think? Who
Well, I
wants?
definitely think it is a boys' club somewhat, but as I said in the earlier time, there are women there. There are more there in the smaller businesses, or smaller projects anyway. But that's changing somewhat, and I think I made the analogy, when I think for us as a woman, I'm looking for other women. I made the analogy, if you're shopping for a red car, all of a sudden you see all the red cars on the road. So as a woman, I do look for women. I look to bring them into my network and part of my team. So I see them more and more. And I do think that even though it's a large boys club, there is you know, a, I'm encouraged to see women growing there, and a girls club forming. But
Yeah.
to a large extent, I think it's access to capital. I think that leveraging capital, getting into those networks of capital, that's a little bit of a hurdle. Once you're in there, then I think it's a lot better.
Right. So talk about what you found difficult in terms of access to capital, and whether you think that it has to do with your gender, or if you think it's just difficult, in general, to start that process.
Some of it is a networking thing. I think it's people talk to, it's somewhat of a boys club, so uh, it just gets handed down that way somewhat. And maybe that's a cultural thing, but you get into those networks of finance and banking a little bit more as men. Some of that's changing now. And, um, you know, uh, when I first got started in this, I spent a lot of time not only networking and finding, contractors and stuff, but talking to lenders and banks, and really getting to know people. Um, uh, Even to this day, I mean, we had to have a co-signer, Linda's husband, on one of our first loans.
Hmm.
I mean, it just is the way it is. Some of that's just the way the equation works when you're in development, because income is done, not, it's not all W-2 income. So some of it's just that, um, but yeah, it just takes a little time, I think, to get into those networks. But once you're in the networks, I think then it really helps. And then you have to bring other people into the network. You have to vouch for them. You have to recommend who to go to. And I think that is what's happening now.
Yeah.
But it's just at a smaller scale. I think it's just been happening for men for a much longer time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of things, right? I mean, you raise a good point about networking. I mean, I personally think that, look, life's all about people, and to the extent you can build real relationships with people that you like, who can help you in some way, people should spend as much time as possible. In fact, I looked at my own schedule, my own calendar this morning, and every lunch for the next 2 weeks is booked right now with different people that I'm
Mhm,
meeting to network, to talk to. And
mhm,
I just think if I could give one piece of advice, um, really think about trying to grow your network constantly, meet new people. I mean, A, it's interesting, but B, it can obviously be, helpful for your business. And
It's the number one thing. The number one thing. I've never been shy about raising money. I had to do it for a lot of political campaigns that I belonged to. So that was never a problem. It's really the just networking, just constantly out there, because really people give you money. Private money isn't a problem. It's the institutional money that is something you have to really learn and get into the network. And that's something that takes a little longer.
I would also add, I think a lot of developers that I know come from fields that are dominantly male.
Mhm.
So a lot of, trades folks, luckily Nikisha has a construction background but I don't think that's common. So that's kind of been my experience, in addition to kind of the finance field.
No, I think you're right. I mean, if you look at like construction project managers, for example, which then often graduate to be borrowers, right? People who they go from construction project managers to general contractors to then running their own companies. And I've often said that like my most successful borrowers over the years have been people who built things for others. And then, over time thought, well, wait a minute, why am I building for this guy when I could have my own company and be a developer? That's Nikisha, right?
Yeah.
And but when you look around at who the construction project managers are, they're men generally. I mean, we've interviewed lots of them for our construction arm, the construction arm of my one of my companies, and it's mainly men. So Nikisha, why don't you talk more about your impressions of things and kind of what you're doing to make change, et cetera.
Yeah, I think to kind of add on to what Julie said about the red cars, when I got your email about having this Zoom, I was like, oh wait, but I know lots of women in development, and some are also realtors, and some are also in construction, and some are in it with their husbands, and I think it's array and of how. And I agree, like even folks that I know that want to get into it, they're in STEM careers, they're into computer science, they're into finance, they're engineers. And I think it's something that you may or may not feel comfortable with, either the finance piece, the numbers, the asking for the money, going to the lender, because coming from construction, I understood numbers and I've had to do a million spreadsheets in my life, but the finance piece was something that I had to learn. I had to, I had a great teacher, just like I had great teachers in construction. I had great teachers in development that like really walked me through the numbers and to help me understand what the banks were looking for, and to evaluate deals. And that's many questions that I have. My friends ask me, how do I know? How do I know I need to do this job from a finance piece and from a construction piece to know whether or not it's a good deal? Am I going to find a crack foundation and what to look for when you're doing a walkthrough of a property? And I think it's something that, just as women, that we aren't taught to do. We don't learn, early on, right? We talk about math and how, I had a conversation with my friends about like, how you push your girls versus your boys. And, we tell boys to, work harder, it's okay. And you just got to keep going. And a lot of times in household women, girls are like, they, better luck next time, just like we don't push them like we push little boys. And I think that kind of goes through education and understanding, and also just the disparity in households of Black households and people of color that a lot of times, I mean, for me, like, I was fortunate where I saw my grandparents have rental property.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother was the one out there collecting rent, from the tenants and having to call the contractors when something broke. And I think many people don't have those experiences. And it's a risk factor, right? It's a risk factor. If you do get money, you're probably taking care of parents, you're taking care of your kids. There's just, but when you do the numbers and you understand the numbers, you understand it's not as big of a risk as you think. And, you're like, the money that I'm putting into this 401k or doing the stock market, I guess it depends if you're sitting at your computer all day. Real estate is a really good place to put your money.
Yeah, that's right. I think having your grandmother, what an incredible guidepost and example for you, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I just think that you see that growing up. I mean, my father was a developer and nobody in his family had done it before. And I had an insight as a kid watching the downturn of the late 80s and early 90s happen and how hard that was on him and how he changed his business to try to deal with that. And by the time he passed away, suddenly things were better for my mother because of it. But you just learn so much, from seeing someone do it before you, both, the good things they did, the things they did right, and the things they did wrong.
Mhm.
And
You learn from them.
yeah, absolutely. And then I also think we talked about in preparation for this, um, learning how to talk to lenders about your project and how to sort of pitch your deals, whether it's a real estate development deal or another deal, is really important. Nikisha, you told me something cool you're doing on that front to help folks really learn how to
Uh,
pitch. I think that folks would find that interesting.
yeah, I'm on the board of an organization called Black Girl Ventures, and it's an organization that's supporting Black and Brown identified women to support these entrepreneurs, right? To connect to like-minded folks, to funders, and it's a community based feel that you kind of get to know folks that you might not be able to ever get to know.
Hmm.
And we also do training to help folks do the pitch, right? Do the numbers, and understand what you need to do when you go out and ask for that money. And that's a part that Black and Brown women just typically don't have. They don't have that experience, and we help give them that experience. We help them give, maybe they come to a pitch competition, and you got the audience voting for you. But I think it's an opportunity that as women we all need. But I think there's a huge disparity for Black and Brown women, and BGV is trying to make that gap smaller. And there's still only a small percentage of funds that are going. It's great that I found you, but there's so few you Bryans out
Yeah.
there that are willing to take chances on women and women of color.
Well, I'll tell you
Um,
this. I mean, the reason I took a chance on you was just my instinct. I think you're a good person who tries hard and will figure out a way to be successful. And that's kind of what I look for. And I also think your background in construction is really helpful. And I think
Mhm.
it gets to a sort of a bigger picture issue. And I think why there aren't more women in development, which is to a really astute point you made earlier, Nikisha, which is, how do we push our children when they're young, right? I mean, you said something about pushing little girls in a different, or little boys more than little girls. And, we have kind of two rules for my kids in my family. I have an 8, a 6, and a 2-year-old, and it's be honest all the time. If you lie, we have a big problem. And never quit. We never quit. We work our asses off through everything. And that messaging, my 2-year-old will get it in this household, but it does make you wonder. And the other thing, and I'm going to give a shout out to my friend who has a clothing company called Piccolina, where it's all designed for really little girls to have clothing that inspires them in science, math, and also there's clothing with women like Maya Angelou and Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton and other examples of successful women that are trying to inspire them to be great in all manner of professions. I think that's really important, to change the dynamic. So let's talk a little bit about what you guys love about development. Like, why do you keep doing it? Because it's obviously very hard. Kind of what your favorite thing about development is, and then also talk about your least favorite thing. Let's do favorite and least favorite. Nikisha, you can go if you'd like.
yeah, I really love it's I love driving around neighborhoods and looking at houses, right? And visualizing what you could do, right?
Yeah.
I love the beginning part. I'm on the Zillow and the Redfin, and I'm driving around places, and and I have a friend that I'm trying to help buy a house now, and she's always sending me these listings, and there's just something about building that home, and I think it was said earlier, when you have these buyers come in and it's their dream home, and for me with construction, that I can make that, and
Yeah.
people, my contractors always like, you love these pocket doors, don't you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I do, because I can do so much more with the space when I don't have a swinging door.
Great.
And so I love to see it all come together, and from the drywall, sometimes even early as that framing stage, to really see everything come together and walk through spaces. And one of my properties, I pre-sold, and being able to walk those buyers through it step by step by step, and then giving them opportunity to buy or to make selections, and then they're like into it, and they're like, oh yes, can we get this shower head, and can we get this instant hot pot thing that I've never installed before, but they're excited about it. And so I think that's the part that is going to keep me doing more of this. And I love the part of I love pre-selling things, but I also really love to see their reaction, right? And just like the glow they have, being able to go through that process.
All right. What's one thing you don't like?
One thing I don't like, and for me, because I've managed the construction of my projects, is going to be, contractors that are no-shows, and, coming back and having to try to push to renegotiate contracts, right? COVID happened and prices went up like crazy. And so having to work through, what works for everybody is difficult, right? It's a numbers game of having to refinance, right? And to find those funds to make up the difference. And that's where those risks comes in, right? That part that people really don't like.
That's right. Julie, how about you? What do you like and what don't you like?
Yeah, I like everything about it. Like Nikisha is saying, just everything from connecting with the sellers and solving their problems and figuring out if it's a deal and putting the deal together. And I actually enjoy raising money. Again, it's all a networking and connecting thing. And the whole design process, I really like building a team. That was something we spent a lot of time on before we launched our first deal. We spent a lot of time interviewing people and know who to go to and have backups. And I love putting together a team and really making it a high performing team, and just everything down to the strategy of selling and that feeling when people are really happy with it. I like that we do both single family home and multifamily. I like that. I'd like to keep growing with that, and because they are challenging. Every deal is a challenge, and the more I'm really challenged by some of the bigger ones, and but I want to perfect this too. So that's good. And what the hard parts for me are really the thing I don't like is when people aren't transparent. When just tell me what the problem is, and I just want to know that, and then I can help solve it. We can bring people together. It's when people hold things close and don't want to talk about it and tell you, and then suddenly you have a big problem.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that one. That's a good point. Jessica, how about you? What do you like and what don't you like?
Yeah, I think I agree with what everyone was saying, just seeing kind of your vision come to life. Although I'm not a builder myself, just seeing, for example, a home we're building from the ground up, it's all framed up and it was an empty lot. So it's going to be, an amazing new home, and there was nothing there. So that's exciting. I also love driving around, seeing different neighborhoods, seeing what's on the market, what's going on here, what's going on there. Just kind of like being in the know. Challenges keep me up all night. whether it's a neighbor issue or a permit delay, things that are out of my control are, I think, the stuff that I like least.
So have you woken up yet in the middle of the night thinking about your projects? And
Of course.
are you dreaming about your projects yet?
Not dreaming. It's mostly the challenges keeping me up.
Yeah, I will wake up with thoughts about them or ideas in the middle of the night. Not that often, thankfully, but quite a lot. But no, that's been really helpful. So this has really been awesome. I mean, you guys have really provided some great insight and some interesting thoughts. I want to leave with one last question. So, what can folks like me in the lending space do to encourage more, women in development? What can we do better? Who wants to start?
I think there's the Black Real Estate Group in DC. I think reaching out to them. There's also DC Crew. I know it's more commercial, but there's lots of women in that space that are that may work for developers that would like to one day have their own company and do their own projects. I think those are two really great organizations to reach out to and advertise to.
I'm all for that. For me, I love networking and meeting new people, and I love helping people. The reason people ask me, like, you develop a lot and do a lot of other things. Why do you still do hard money lending? And mainly it's because I feel like I can still help people with their businesses, which ultimately help their lives. I've also gotten some of my borrowers to start doing the crazy workout stuff that I do and diet stuff. So that's been fun as well. But it's fun to be able to help people. Julie, what about you?
I would say that the same things you would do to help your men friends will help your women friends, that
Yeah.
it's the same thing. And a lot of it is networking. A lot of it is, I say it kind of in a funny way about you look for what, you find what you're looking for. So
Mhm.
just knowing that you want to help women developers, you're going to find women developers and you're going to help them. And because that's what you're looking for. And I think sometimes that's all it takes is really making it an effort at the beginning. And then you get into that network because we're in those networks and we can introduce more. And it's just a matter, it's a multiplication then.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think little things like introducing you to the bank I'm on the board of, which I think I've maybe done for you all, for at least some of you, really can help as well. Nikisha, I'd like to be at one of those pitch contests too, by the way. That'd be fun.
Yeah, they're online right now, so
They'll
I
get
will
this,
definitely.
they'll get the Straight Talk Express always, so they'll get the real truth, whatever that is. Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking of how I first learned about you, Brian, was through a subcontractor, my HVAC guy who I've been working with for years. He's the first person who was like, "Oh, you need to meet Brian Athey." So I think just kind of what has been said already, just networking, asking around. And it reminds me too that I don't have a network of women developer friends, and I
Well, you
need
do
to be
now.
part of that. I know. So this is a great way for me to, meet you all and to hopefully broaden my network. So
Mhm, mhm.
I thank you for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there's anything I can do to help with that, or if you all have other networks that I can come talk to, or or do events with, I'd love to do it. Always open to stuff like that. Can do it via Zoom or in person, either way. But anyways, listen, thank you all for your time today. It's been really interesting. It's been great conversation, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.